Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing my 5 bold predictions for the San Jose Sharks heading into the 23-24 season. Yes, it is indeed that time of the year again where I make a complete fool of myself by outlining 5 things that I think will happen that will absolutely not actually end up happening in the 23-24 season. This happened last year, the year before that, but as they say, never give up, and so here I am. And let us start off first with my first bold prediction, which is one that is in relation to a video I made about a week ago, which is that the Sharks will end up being better this season compared to last. This is me doubling down on that opinion. Now, it should be noted a couple of things here. When I say will be better, I don't mean that they're going to make waves in the NHL and make the playoffs or anything like that, as much as I would love to see it. Instead, I think that the Sharks will just generally be a better team than last season, even if that only ends up being an improvement of a couple of points in the standings. On top of that, I also want to make a very big difference between thinking that the Sharks will be better and hoping that the Sharks will be better. Obviously, unless I can think that the Sharks will make the playoffs, at which point I would absolutely love to see that, even if they were to bow out in the first round. Honestly, just seeing playoff hockey for the first time in 5 years would be amazing. But if them being better meant like going from 3rd last in the league to 8th last in the league, I don't really want to see that. I'd rather see them get the improved draft position if in either case they're not actually making it to the postseason. Having said that, just because of that, I do still think the Sharks will be a better team. They've seen a large improvement to their forward group. Yes, the departure of Timo Meier obviously hurts, but the inclusion of players like Granlund, Zadina, Duclair, Hoffman, as well as the possible inclusion of the younger prospects for the San Jose Sharks like Eklund or Bordelot should absolutely bolster a forward core that was very, very weak last season, even with Timo Meier on the team. And then, of course, we do have the departure of Erik Karlsson of note, and it will definitely hurt the defensive scoring for the San Jose Sharks, but it is also possible that they can consolidate a more defensive system now that Erik Karlsson has departed, and they can commit to more of a sort of a shot suppression style compared to the maybe slightly more run and gun style that they had when Karlsson was on the team. And while the goaltending did see a swap out and is not necessarily expected to be that much better, with a better defense in front of them, their stats should just generally improve because those two positions, those two factors are pretty interconnected between teams. And so I do indeed think that the Sharks, even if it's marginally, will be better than next season. The next bold prediction I have here is that Kähkönen will end up being the 1A goaltender by the end of next season. I had a prediction somewhat similar to this last season, which I thought was Kähkönen going to be taking the starting job from James Reimer. That didn't really end up happening. What ended up happening is that both Kähkönen and James Reimer were absolutely horrible and did not deserve to be called a starter in either situation. But here, I'm going to sort of go for that one again, but maybe not commit as much to it. I don't think Kähkönen is necessarily going to be considered the starter for the San Jose Sharks by the end of the season, but by saying that he is the 1A, I mean he's probably going to end up getting more games than Blackwood. Yes, Blackwood probably has more history of being a good goaltender at the NHL level, even that's not super recently, but I think multiple factors will combine for this. First of all, Blackwood's injury history doesn't necessarily convince me that he's actually going to be able to play a full season with the San Jose Sharks. Second, Kähkönen having more experience with the organization and in particular with David Quinn will make it so that Blackwood will likely have to heavily outperform Kähkönen to actually be given those preferential starts compared to Kähkönen, who has that extra level of experience. And 3, I do think Kähkönen will be able to sort of fully reset from what was just an absolutely awful season last year and perhaps put up a slightly better performance, while Blackwood is going to be on a new team, a new environment, which can lead to a massive bounce back, but could also lead to just continued mediocre to below average play from him. So I do think Kähkönen, even if it's not by a wide margin, something like 45 games to Blackwood's 37, should end up being the 1A starter by the end of the season. Again, it is a bold prediction. The third one here is that Thrun will end up being the number 1 power play quarterback for the San Jose Sharks. Now, this isn't necessarily me saying that Thrun is going to suddenly become the next Erik Karlsson and put up like 80 points next season, but this is more so for the fact that the Sharks do not really have a better option for this role. Now, at the beginning of the season, it is unlikely that they will start with Henry Thrun in this role. They'll try out Matt Benning, they'll try out Jacob McDonald, they'll try out Mario Ferraro, but any of those choices are very unlikely to actually work, and eventually it's possible that the Sharks will indeed fall to Thrun, and I think he'll be able to do decently well in this role, even if it's not necessarily excelling in it. And I do think out of all of the younger defensemen, even though there are others who could be capable of filling in this role, like Mukhamadullin or Gavanke, the fact is that Thrun is the most likely to actually get consistent NHL time next season because of the fact that he played with the San Jose Sharks for a few games at the end of last season. And so while Mukhamadullin and Gavanke will perhaps get some NHL games at times, they will have to heavily overperform to actually be able to keep themselves in the NHL lineup. If that doesn't happen, they'll get their few games and then get sent back down, while Thrun is more likely to actually be able to play close to a full 82-game season, in my opinion, especially since as we continue approaching the training camp and preseason in just a few weeks away now, the Sharks have yet to actually make a move to help out their traffic jam on defense. And so indeed, I do think that Thrun could be that number one guy by end of year. The fourth bold prediction here is that Granlund, a newcomer to the San Jose Sharks, will score 50 plus points this season. I had a prediction somewhat similar to this last year, where I predicted newcomer Oscar Lindblom to get 50 plus points, and I could not be more wrong in that situation. And so let's try that one again with a different player with definitely more hopes, I would say, in Mikael Granlund. I've pointed out that Granlund was at one point a very, very good playmaker, and while that has fallen off a bit as of late, he is still having a somewhat recent strong season with the Nashville Predators, even if he wasn't necessarily given the opportunity to shine with the Pittsburgh Penguins when he was traded there. And so I think in the situation that the Sharks are going to be putting him into, he will be able to excel more. Yes, he might find himself a bit on the third line, but he will be given much more offensive options on that third line. Players like Zadina, LeBanc, Hoffman, Eklund, perhaps even Bordeleau if he's playing on the wing. These could be players who could very well help Granlund get those extra points, and it is also very possible that Granlund can even break into the top 6 for the San Jose Sharks because, first of all, even though Granlund is a center, he can play the wing if necessary, so he could end up being the winger for either Couture or Hertl in that top 6. But also, there was an experiment that we saw the Sharks do at the end of last season, which was actually having Hertl play the wing, which would allow Granlund to actually be the second-line center for the San Jose Sharks and have Hertl be his winger or Hertl be the first-line winger. So in either of these cases, this will benefit Granlund for sure, and then plus, I do think he'll be a strong bonus for the San Jose Sharks on the power play to help that out, and I do think he'll be able to hit that 50-point mark. Perhaps not much more than that, but that would still be pretty good for this pickup. And then finally, I will echo a bold prediction that I had last season that did not end up coming true, which was that Hertl would have a better season. He would rebound. I thought because he was not going to have that pressure of it being a contract year in his head anymore, that he'll be sort of more unleashed. That didn't end up happening. While he put up an okay season with 60 plus points, his general play on the ice left a lot to be desired. This season, I'm going to say the exact same thing, that Hertl will indeed rebound. I think this year, there are also some factors that can really help in that. Primarily, this is going to be a very different feel for the team with so many new additions. I already outlined multiple of them at forward, but there's also a couple of additions on defense as well, like Ruda and Burrows, plus the new goaltender could also add a completely new spin depending on how things go. There's going to be some younger players injected into the lineup like Eklund, or there's perhaps going to be some younger players. I obviously don't know the future, but players like Eklund, Bordeleau, Thrun could flood the lineup with some youth, which could definitely help energize the slightly energy-less veteran players that the Sharks have. It was only a few years ago where you could not wipe the smile off of Tomas Hertl's face, but he has seemingly lost that emotion, lost that passion for the game over these past couple of years because the Sharks have been so bad. But this year, even if the Sharks aren't necessarily going to be making the playoffs, it should be more exciting, which could definitely help Hertl perform at a better level than he was at last season. Plus, unless his point totals fall dramatically, it's hard to necessarily be that much worse than how he looked on the ice, which was just honestly quite mediocre and nowhere near the $8 million that he should be trying to earn on the ice. But that would do it for these bold predictions. Like I mentioned, I am rarely correct with any of these, and even if I were to be correct with all 5 of them, it's still unlikely that the Sharks actually end up making the playoffs, so it's not really going to be making much of a difference. But still, one thing is hopefully for sure, that this should end up being a much more exciting season than last year. Class dismissed.